2205, this is Traveling with the Elderly. I'm Carol with the committee. Today we have two speakers with us. We have Jerry Clewlow. He's a retired plastic industry business executive, experienced in multi-plant leadership for directing businesses, turnarounds, and new business development. During his career, he's worked at Crescent Plastic, General Tire, GenCorp, American Sheet Excursion, Fisher Scientific, and Spencer Industries. Jerry is also the retired lieutenant colonel from the Indiana Army National Guard. He's currently the president of the Board of Directors for Honor Flight of Southern Indiana, a 501c3 organization with a mission for providing senior veterans a free flight to Washington, D.C. to visit the war memorials. Over here we have Doug Joest. He's been the executive director of the Evansville Regional Airport since 2012. He's an Evansville native and became interested in aviation at an early age. He earned his pilot's license while attending high school. He worked on the airport ramp while completing his BS in accounting at the University of Southern Indiana. After working in public accounting and corporate finance, he joined the Evansville Airport staff as financial manager and treasurer in 2007. He is the president and on the board of the Aviation Association of Indiana. He is also active with the American Association of Airport Executives, the board of Southwestern Indiana Chamber of Commerce, the Growth Alliance of Greater Evansville, the Evansville Pilots Club. He's also on the board of advisors for the Romaine College of Business at USI and served as the Romaine College of Business Executive in Residence. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here today. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the airport, maybe some stuff you didn't know, and then get into some details about some tips on traveling in general, and as well as with the people that might have a little trouble getting around. And I'm going to start by saying this room kind of has a special meaning to me because about 40 years ago, my wife and I had our wedding reception, and it wasn't quite this shape, but it was right here. So it's kind of neat to come back. Just real quick, the Airport Authority is a separate governmental entity. We kind of like the school corporation or the library. We have our own board of directors, and they're appointed. We have 5 board members. 3 are appointed by the mayor, and 2 by the county commissioners, and they're on staggered 3-year terms. So I don't have a brand new set of bosses every time there's an election. So it's kind of nice. We got nice continuity in that regard. Our budgets are reviewed by the county council every year, and we are audited every year by the State Board of Accounts. So while we're our own little separate governmental entity, there's a lot of oversight in our operations. We're also governed by a lot of regulatory agencies, like any business or governmental agency, but we also are pretty much what we do and don't do is driven by the FAA and TSA. And then we work a lot with our tenants. The other thing we have is I don't know if you know or not, the old Hamilton's golf course we picked up about 8 years ago. So the airport owns and operates that. We actually have a professional golf course management team run that for us. And we acquired it because we didn't want it to become a subdivision full of houses that turn around and complain about noise and that type of thing. In exchange, we've made some investments there, and we're going to keep it open as a golf course. There's some other key tenants on the airport. Tri-State Aero is greatly involved in all the aircraft operations. They do they do all the fueling on the airport. They handle the private and business aircraft. Anything from the small Piper Cub, which there aren't really anymore, Air Force One, and everything in between. The Hampton Inn is on airport property, so that gives us another source of revenue. And then the Berry Plastics warehouse, that's a 1 million square foot distribution center. The airport doesn't own the building, but it's on airport land, so we get revenue from that ground lease. So the reason we have all these other properties and interests is it diversifies our income stream, and we're not totally dependent on airline rates and charges to pay our bills and do what we need to do. So some other tenants, the sheriff's substation out on 41 is a tenant. Behind that building is the Department of Corrections. It used to be the Weather Bureau back when we had a manned Weather Bureau here. There's a Postal Service sorting facility out on the west side of the airport where Petersburg Road dead ends into the airport fence. That's also a tenant. Raven Tires in what we used to be what we call the Foreign Trade Zone warehouse, which is on the east side of the airport close to the Berry. Air Commerce Park is the Berry warehouse, plus there's 2 other large industrial sites that are available there for future development. And then what we don't have buildings on, we farm. So anything we can do to, because if we don't farm it, we got to mow it, and that's an expense. So if you farm it, we get some income. So again, we use that to balance out our revenue streams so we can keep our rates and charges to the airlines low so we can attract and keep air service here. And a few years ago, there was an economic impact study done across the state, and our airport has almost $1 billion impact on the local economy each year. And between the airport and all of its tenants, there's probably at least 500 people that have full-time jobs on airport property. Here's the airport. Airport was started back in 1929, and that might be hard to see, but here's Highway 41. Here's the railroad track that goes north. We're looking north. We're not sure when it was, but the airport was formed in 29. This is in the early 30s, we think, because Republic aircraft hasn't been built yet. And then here's a view from about a year ago. Again, here's the highway from almost the same position. Here's the highway, here's the railroad track, and then there's everything else. And that's Whirlpool, and this is after we moved the runway, because it used to come all the way down to there. And I want to talk about that next. We finished this project about 2 years ago. It was budgeted to be $66 million, and it was primarily to comply with new safety standards. If you see this little yellow trapezoid, if you will, it was out here, and that wasn't acceptable with Atlas Fan Lines, Whirlpool, and all these homes over there. So there was a study done, and it was decided the best way to comply was basically take the red pavement out, and then we added new pavement from here on out there. But that involved closing a portion of Oak Hill Road, relocating it, moving a highway, part of Highway 57, moving a railroad track. So we spent about $15 million doing all these things outside the airport to reroute the traffic and then actually improve the roads. So if you don't like the roundabouts out there, they're our fault. So we added this section and improved this intersection up here at 57 in Kansas and did all that. So overall, the project we got done over a year ahead of time. We were actually $3 million under budget. We didn't borrow any money. Most of it was funded by federal grants. There was over 300, almost 400 construction jobs created while it was being done. And most of the work was done by local contractors, and that was on purpose. We could have let one huge contract, but it would have been a big national company, and we broke it up into many contracts so that the smaller ones can take off those chunks of the project. So all but about 5 of the contracts were local. With the runway where it is now, it's much more efficient. We meet the safety standards. Like I mentioned earlier, we improved the traffic. We even eliminated a railroad crossing by Oak Hill School by how we rearranged the roads and the railroad track. One of the environmental things we did that was kind of neat is all the concrete that we had to break up in the old section. We hauled it over. We brought in a temporary crusher, crushed it, a big magnet pulled all the rebar out it. Then we put it back down as the subbase for the new runway. So we saved over $300,000 doing that, plus the environmental aspects of hauling that much concrete to a landfill somewhere. And then last but not least, we met the primary reason for doing it, the safety aspect. And then we got to test it with a big airplane not too long after it was open. That was when Air Force One came in October of 2014. And by getting it done early, we were able to make these enhancements to air service. Delta Airlines brought in the bigger Boeing 717 to Atlanta. American started service to Chicago. And then about shortly after we got done, United announced that they were going to add flights to Chicago. And then just as a follow-on to that, we just did a ribbon cutting about 3 weeks ago for our 5th jet bridge. And this one, United is going to use. And then coming up, we're going to have a renovation of the terminal. We were part of the Regional Cities Initiative. We have some state funding to help us fix up the terminal building. We're going to centralize now we got 2 separate screening areas. We're going to have one central one in the center. That way you'll be able to get to the restaurant and other amenities after you go through security. And the building's almost 30 years old, so it needs an update on systems and stuff you don't really see, as well as the cosmetic stuff. And then last but not least, in June, we added service to Orlando Sanford with Allegiant Airlines, and that's every Thursday and Sunday. They go nonstop from here to Sanford, Florida on a 166-passenger MD-80. The other neat thing we have is we now have all 3 surviving legacy carriers here. We've got American, Delta, and United. All the others are gone. Northwest, Continental, TWA, Eastern, Braniff, depending on how far back you want to go back. So these are the only 3 that are remaining. And what's neat about them is not only do we have those 3, they have these huge networks for anybody wanting to travel internationally. I like to use United as a great example because now we've got to remember the airlines get us out of town, but it's also what brings people into town. And if we didn't have these connections, it would be hard for people to get here. So the example I like to use that what United brought to the table was people in Germany that wanted to come to Evansville get on the Lufthansa website. They wouldn't see Evansville as a destination, but now they do. So that gave us additional connectivity. Real quick, about a year ago we did a study. Our seating capacity went up 30%. Our fares were down about 11%. Here's how we compared to some of our peers. For the calendar year 2015, our total passenger count was up 19.25%. This year will be about level, but given that we had such a huge jump last year, we're happy with that. And real quick, now and then we get that, why shouldn't I just fly out of Louisville instead of Evansville? Here's just one example. Somebody on social media complained about some ridiculously high fare, and I'll never fly out of Evansville. So I didn't know where they were flying, so I said, where could I go that's real expensive? So I just thought, how about Paris? So I went, and without searching a whole lot, I just said, okay, what's the airfare to Paris? I picked spring break, because that's back when this happened. And it was pretty close, so the fare was a little bit higher than it would have been if I'd planned sooner. But it was $13.48 out of Evansville, and it was $30 more out of Louisville. But that's not it. The other thing is if you flew out of Louisville, you'd have to leave here at 6 in the morning, drive to Louisville to get on an airplane and go to Chicago 3 hours earlier than the flight from Evansville would get you there. And then you get on the same airplane at 6:25 in the afternoon in Chicago to go to Paris. So you save all that time and expense, plus the airfare. So we realize occasionally it'll make sense to go to other airports, but you need to keep the total costs in mind when you do your travel. I also hear, well, if I go to Louisville, I don't have to make a connection. And I say, you're just driving to it. It's much easier to fly to a connection because you go through security here, it's much easier, parking's closer, so on and so forth. So again, that's the effects of that. A couple of tools we have on our website. Here's a cost calculator. You can plug, if you want to, we encourage you to check fares, but if you put the fares in this slot and you click, it'll do an apples to apples comparison. It'll compare parking rates to what it is here, and it calculates a mileage figure, and it may or may not put in a value of your time. But anyway, that's one tool. Another tool, we have this route mapper. You put in where you want to go and the dates, or you can click on the blue dot on where you want to go, and it'll fill in the flights that you can get to from here, and it'll show you the routes on the map. Like this morning before I came in, I plugged in London. I think we got a dozen flights a day to get you to London with just one stop. Orlando, there were 17. And it's Orlando International, not Sanford, that Allegiant goes to. Okay, now into why you're here. Here's some travel tips. Okay, if you're traveling, you need some extra assistance, or someone you're traveling with does. The main thing is to do is make your reservations as early as you can. And when you make them, make sure you tell them that you might want wheelchair assistance. When I travel with my dad, it's an automatic. I just say, I need wheelchair assistance for him. Particularly, not so much here, because I can get him to the gate and we go through, but if you're making a connection somewhere, it's real nice to have wheelchair waiting for you when you walk off the airplane. They got your name and they know where you're going. They just push you to the next gate and you're on your way. When you do make your reservations, I would recommend that you don't do the 45-minute layovers. I'd give yourself a little more time. Usually you can pick, you have different options on layovers. I would give yourself more time. Make sure you have your mobile phone number in the reservation or your email if you have it on your phone. That way if their schedule changes, they can let you know. They'll either send you an email or text you. And I'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. And then recognize the difference between a carry-on bag and a personal item. This is a carry-on bag. You can't put it under the seat or anything like that. Don't put any medicines, passports, or anything you really need that you don't want away from yourself, because on most of the flights out of Evansville, this will get a little pink tag on it. You'll give it to them at the gate, or you'll put it on the little elevator on the jet bridge, and then it'll go downstairs, and they put it in with the other bags. And then when you get off the plane, even if you're making a connection, you'll have to claim it there at the gate and go on to your next flight. But anything you put in your personal items, which would be, ladies, hold up your purses, that's a personal item. Or backpack, or anything that fits under the seat. So that's what you want to, put your keys, passports, etc. in. And on a lot of these other things, I'll get into a little bit more detail, but the main thing to remember is that the airlines have their own specific rules for all the different personal items you might have, like service animals, portable oxygen generators, wheelchairs, and etc. Most CPAP machines you can put in your check luggage. And like I mentioned, wheelchair service is available. A lot of people use it just at the hubs. Like Evansville, you're so close to the gates. Most people that are fairly mobile just walk up to the gate. But again, when you're trying to make a connection in those bigger places, it's nice to have a wheelchair. And Jerry will get into how they use wheelchairs on the honor flight. Get there early for your flight. The days are gone when you can show up 15 minutes before your flight in Evansville. Because of TSA and all the security rules, you really need to be here an hour before your flight. And if you need a little bit of help, I would recommend 90 minutes. And when you check in, tell the agent at the gate, hey, I'm going to need some help, or my traveling companion is going to need some help. That way they're kind of, okay, yeah, we'll take care of you, because just in case it wasn't in the reservation, they can make note of it at that time. And then go ahead and go through security. And then when you get to the gate, you might get close to the gate, let the gate agent know, because this is probably a different person than you talk to up front. And again, here's just some general things. Ignoring what I said about 90 minutes, these are just on any flight. If you're going to travel, be there an hour early. If your destination is is an international one, even though you're making a domestic connection, you need to be there 2 hours early, because you and your bags go through some extra scrutiny behind the scenes for international travel. So you need to be there 2 hours early so they can do that. Here's a few simple TSA rules. The main thing is, remember, TSA.gov. There's a wealth of information there, and it's always current in case they change the rules. But that's on that. And this is just a sample of what you would find on an airline website. They got a wealth of information. This happens to be, I know this one is TSA. TSA's even got a site on their website. They can tell you about special assistance, things that they can do as far as clearing any kind of equipment you might have. So they're there to help you. Okay, here's an example of American Airlines website. They have special assistant coordinators, and this is for all kinds of things. If you're traveling while you're pregnant, or you're traveling with a service animal, special meals and nut allergies. And there's just a whole host of things of information on and this is just Americans. United's got it, Delta's got it. Here's another thing about mobility and medical devices. And most of these things you can carry on with you. The only constraint might be space on the airplane. And then again, wheelchairs, oxygen. I think the rules are pretty particular on the oxygen. There's a thing called, and some of you might know this better than I, that they don't let you carry tanks on anymore, but there's an oxygen generator. And they have rules about taking those. You can take them, but you need to check the rules before you go. And here's kind of a warning. Don't assume, even though a plane says it's got power, don't assume that it will power what you're bringing. Here's some general tips that I've got. If you got a smartphone, get the apps for the airlines. They're free. It has all the travel information. You can get your boarding passes on everybody but Allegiant. So you don't even need the paper pass if you don't want it. You just lay your phone on the scanner and away you go. But you can also follow your bag. Sometimes when I'm traveling, I go, did my bag make it or not? You can just get on it, it'll tell you if your bag's on underneath you or not. Another one I use is called TripIt, and it's free too. When you get your electronic email reservations, you just forward it to a TripIt email address. So you get your airline reservation, your hotel reservation, maybe a car rental. You forward it to there, and it builds a nice little itinerary for you, and it's all in one space. You don't have to go, oh, where's that reservation at? It's all right there, and it's real handy. Flightboard is another good, handy one if you're flying. You know how the flight schedules are displayed in all the terminals? This basically gives you that for any airport you want on your phone or your iPad. And again, it's free. That's really about all I got. Just tell you about a few events we have going on. On a week from tomorrow, we're going to have a Wings and Wheels event at the airport on the west side between the Hampton Inn and Tri-State Aero. All of you are familiar with Frog Follies, right? Think of a tiny Frog Follies with airplanes. So we'll have the cars and the airplanes. And it's free. And then on the 22nd, we're having, is it the fourth one? Fifth honor flight. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jerry. And at the end, I'd be glad to take any questions. And I'm sure Jerry will about his presentation.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
We appreciate everything that you're doing with the airport out there. And it's been a great addition to our community. And it's been a great addition to Honor Flight. When Honor Flight first, I wasn't planning on talking about this, but when Honor Flight, we first began to talk about how we're going to do this, we were very fortunate to have a nice regional airport that we could go to. And we went and talked with Doug, and he assembled his staff, and we assembled our staff, and we went through all the different things that we thought we needed, and he went through all the things that his staff went through, all the things that they thought they could provide to us and help us. And it was an unbelievable transition to start an honor flight. I'm not sure it would have been that easy in a big city, to be honest.
No, and I'm talking for not only the airport, but the airline staff. It was kind of a team project. We all kind of jumped together, and it was really fun to help them get the flight launched. And it takes a team effort to load and unload 70 plus wheelchairs.
Yeah. So the Honor Flight of Southern Indiana, we are a nonprofit 501c3 organization with a mission to fly our heroes, our veterans, to Washington, D.C. for free. And we take 85, so that's a large number that fly for free, with an average cost of about $450 per person on the flight. Our flight cost is about $68,000. So it's an expensive proposition, but our community, both individual, corporate, civic, and whatever I've left out, has responded immensely, and we have not had a problem getting the money for the flight. We were told in the beginning that by the time we would get a flight put together with the airport and time we raised the money, we'd be lucky to get one out of here in a year. Well, we went through the process I'll talk about in a little bit, but we got out of here in 6 months. So it was an interesting experience. I've already introduced myself. I'm Jerry Clewlow. I'm the president of the board of the directors with Honor Flight. And in their behalf, we're pleased to be able to present to you today the best practices that we use for flying seniors to Washington for their free flight and to visit their memorials. We often hear from these guys, and we hear this on every flight, and this is just a couple of them, but they'll come up and say, you know, Jerry, this is the best day of my life, or to their bus captain. They're more apt to say it to their bus captain than they are me, but I've heard it. And one guy says, you know, he says, you guys, you treat us so well, I feel like a king. Well, I like hearing that, not because he feels like a king, but we did our job. We did what we were supposed to do to make that guy have the experience of his life at that time. Now, he may have had some earlier, but at that time in his life, that's one of the best things that's happened to him or her. We've not had a flight without women on it, and we're going to have some women on this next flight. So we're going to continue the legacy of always having some women veterans on the flight. This kind of gives you an idea of the urgency of Honor Flight, particularly with the World War II veterans. And if you look at the slide, you know, the World War II veteran, the war ended in 1946. 2004, they finally were able to get a memorial built to honor those guys. Now these guys, and I'm speaking from the heart here, so this is not fact. I'm just sharing my opinion, but these guys saved the world. There were 2 out of 3 people living in tyranny in some form or another throughout the world. I don't care. And that's hard to believe. You say, what's he talking about, 2 out of 3 people? You just stop and think about all the dictators and the different styles of leadership that were out there in the world that was contrary to the freedoms that we all enjoyed. They didn't solve all that, but they solved a bunch of it. They solved a big bunch of it. So I have a little, this is what is kind of amazing to me, that it took us 59 years or somewhere thereabouts to recognize what these guys did. So the average guy was 76 years old when they got this thing commemorated. So a whole bunch of them never had the opportunity to see the World War II memorial. And we'll get into how this kind of progressed. But we also take Korea and Vietnam veterans as well. And they're not any less important, that's not my point. But you can see they got their memorials much more quickly than these guys did. And that's why I'm kind of ranting on the World War II issue. But as far as I'm concerned, all 3 of these conflicts, including up through Desert Storm and Operation, I can't remember the name of it, but anyway, they're all important because they're all doing the same thing. They're all signing a check to give of their life for their country.
By the way, South Korean government invite Korean veterans every year around June, full expense paid. I had a toll-free number, I forgot the number.
I've heard about that. That's done. And that's a really nice gesture that the Korean veterans, South Korea, I don't know if you heard it, but South Korea offers Korean veterans a trip to South Korea for free on an annual basis. And I've heard about that, and that's a great gesture. And we are thankful for that. We really are. But this tells a pretty cool story, I think. The founding fathers, the young captain, retired from the Air Force. He was a physician's assistant, Department of Defense Veterans Affairs hired him as a physician's assistant. And he's working with these guys, and at the time that at the time that the memorial was commemorated, he kept talking to these World War II veterans. Are you going to go see your memorial? And of course, the veterans would say, well, I don't know. I don't know if I got the resources. I don't know if my family will take me. They always had a good excuse for not going. A lot of it was personal. Really, they found excuses, no doubt about it. But finally, Earl said, you know what, to one of the veterans, he said, would you go to World War II memorial if I flew you there personally? And the vet's like, what? Are you serious? And so he did it. And the veteran not only had the experience of his lifetime, but the pilot, Earl Morris, had the experience of his lifetime. And he goes back to his air club and tells these guys, he said, hey guys, you got to do this. This is really something. And so some of his buddies decided they were going to do it. And individuals flew veterans to Washington, D.C. to see their memorial out of Springfield, Ohio. And they began to realize, hey, this is big. This is so much bigger than us. We can't do this. So they assembled a team and decided to launch an organization called the Honor Flight Network. And since 2005, when they launched that network, we've flown over 180,000 veterans in 11 years, which is pretty remarkable. You stop and think about it. And you stop and think about $180,000, $450 a copy, and that's in Evansville. Those guys on the West Coast, that's much higher than that because that's a 4-day trip for them. San Diego, Hawaii, San Francisco, some of those West Coast, those guys are coming in here for 4 days. They got a day of flying, a day of trip, a day of rest, a day back. Because 4 days of that kind of experience on the average age of 90 or and above, it takes its toll. So they have to have a little more rest than what we do in 1 day. We're fortunate that we can do it in 1 day. But it all started with one Air Force captain who had it in his heart to make sure that this guy got to see their memorial. And here again, we were established in 2005. We got 133 operating hubs in the state, 42 states. Honor Flight was the 133rd hub. You got to realize that some of these hubs they become together and they develop, and some go out of business because they don't have any vets. Some areas there are no vets. They've serviced everything that's available. We're not there yet. We are getting there with World War II veterans. Like I say, on this flight that's going in October, we'll be somewhere around I got 40 on there right now, and there's usually a 20% dropout rate, so I'll be lucky if I get 30, 32, 35 out of that 40. It's just the way it is with the World War II vets. This is a timeline. I've talked a little bit about that, but a young lady that works for Gentiva, she saw a movie called One Last Mission. It's an interesting movie. I don't know if anybody in the room has seen it, but it's about this last mission of getting these guys to Washington, D.C., and it was made out of the Honor Flight in Wisconsin. And it was done. It's an excellent movie. They did a great job with it. But anyway, it inspired her to want to do something, to try to get an honor flight together. And we were both attending there's a military meeting once a month at the National Guard Armory, and it talks about all the different attributes that are services that are available to service members in the area. Well, I was there. She came up to me and said, would you be interested in helping me farm an honor flight? Well, I had actually thought about it before, but I didn't do anything about it. It was just a thought. So when she said that, I'm like, yeah, I would like to help. And she had already done the contact information, called National, talked to them. She had already done a lot of legwork. All she needed was somebody to help her. not somebody, somebodies. And I was one of those that said I would step up and help. And so that was in, she saw the movie in 13 and 14, in the winter of 14, we got together, we started planning, and in March, we had our first meeting as a planning committee meeting, and we found people in different areas of influence that we thought could bring something to the table. And anyway, that happened in March. We started fundraising in June of that year. By the end of August, we had enough money to take a flight out of Evansville, Indiana in October. You have to have the money before you can schedule the flight.
Yep.
So,
they always say, show me the money.
so every time I call American Airlines back, at the beginning we used U.S. Air. And interesting there too, because U.S. Air could only provide us an aircraft that allowed us to take 150 people, 149 actually. And when U.S. Air and American merged, we were able to bump up to a larger aircraft. Now we take 186 people total, 85 veterans, 85 guardians, 4 doctors and staff. So we've got 170 people that are dealing with the veterans, the veterans and the helpers, the guardians. And then we've got 4 doctors, and then we've got staff that's coordinating everything that happens between the memorials, and if there's any glitches. Sometimes there's another honor flight in the way that we got to wait for them to clear to get out. It's just logistical issues that are there, and you got to deal with it. So that's how we are up to 85 because of the merger with American Air. And we were able to get a larger aircraft, and the airport was able to take care of the larger aircraft. Had we had at the time that U.S. Air was serving us, had we had a larger aircraft, I don't think we were ready to handle that at the airport.
Yeah, we were.
Were we?
Yeah.
Okay. But anyway, it worked out well. Again, we went to the airport and said, "Hey, we got to talk to American. We can get 85 veterans on a plane, 186 people. Can we handle the plane?" Yeah, we can do it. I think in the beginning though, we had a tow motor issue or something, didn't we? That
was some of the logistics you refer to within the American/U.S. Air organization.
Oh, okay.
They weren't yet merged when you had your first flight.
Yeah.
That was some of the stuff.
At the first flight, the tow motor was blowing smoke, pushing that aircraft out. And we got out there though.
They brought one in for it.
Yeah.
That's how we finally resolved it. Because it's Airbus that they take this as a much bigger airplane than what until Delta brought this bigger airplane now, and this is part of where all the people get together. We now use Delta's tug to push this American airplane out when it's in here now. And they brought in the special tow bar for that bigger airplane. So the tow bar's here, we bum, Delta helps us out. It's one of those neat things where we all work together.
It's interesting too, because having a regional airport, what we have in Evansville, we've had as many, we think, of 3,500 people at the end of the day when we return from Washington, D.C. We've had projected as many as 3,500 in our airport.
I know the first flight we had enough that it scared me.
Yeah. And in Indianapolis, they don't have much more than that for theirs. And the airport wouldn't let them use it. So that's the difference between having to deal with a big airline and the regional airport. The nice thing about the regional airports, we've got all the resources of a major metropolitan area. There's so many benefits that we see in honor flight because that's our only means of transportation. So I've talked about who we take, and we take any veteran. There for a while we were taking only World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. But we will take any veteran now, even if they weren't in World War II. But if they served their country, we're going to take them whenever they become eligible. And you become eligible by age. The most senior veterans fly first, regardless of what conflict they were in. I mean, we've had some Korean veterans that are well into their 90s, and you would have thought they'd have been World War II veterans, but they weren't, for whatever the reason. So it's interesting, but and then we always take, if a veteran has a prognosis of less than a year, terminally ill, the doctor's prognosis is less than a year, we put him on the flight because we want him to have the opportunity. So if you know of veterans out there, encourage them to apply. And they'll probably say, well, I didn't serve in Korea. That's okay. That's all right. Sign up anyway. Okay? Now, that's a change. I know you've heard before that it's only World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. But we are opening it up to all veterans because all veterans served. The commitment's always been the same. The sacrifice may not have been, but the commitment was. So, this is kind of like the honor flight experience. I mean, the first day, the veterans received a call of acceptance, which is coming up August 27th for the October flight. When we call those veterans, they'll be excited. I mean, when they hear that on the end of the phone, that, hey, Mr. Clewlow, you've been accepted to go on the honor flight in October. Oh my gosh. And then hey, Mary, I'm going on the honor flight, So it's an exciting thing for them. And it's a fun day for us to call because we love listening to those phone calls. And then they're interviewed on September the 10th for this coming October flight. That's a fun day because the guardians and the veterans all come in at an assigned time. We have assigned times for each veteran and guardian to come in. And it's a fun day just listening to their stories because we sign 45 minutes to each interview. Well, it's hard to get them out of there because they want to tell you everything they've done. And we really have to work hard to keep them on schedule. But we enjoy it. And then 2 days before the honor flight, which is like on October 22nd, on the 20th, we're going to have the meet and greet evening of honor at the Coliseum. And we have it 2 days before the flight. When we first started, we had it the Friday night before the flight. But what happens is we bring them in for an evening of honor. We talk to them. We tell them what to expect, what they're going to do, and some of the exciting things they're going to see. And by the end of the evening, we got these guys and ladies so pumped up, they can't go to sleep. So after the first flight, we thought, these guys, this is tough. It's not only tough on them, it was tough on us. And we said, maybe we should back it off a day and give them time to come back down and then put them on. And that's what we did. But it helped. Flight day, they got to show up at 5:30 now instead of 5:45. But they show up at 5:30. They're excited to get there, but there's a little anxiety because now they really are going to have to fly. And a lot of those guys haven't flown, and ladies. Some of them have never flown in their life. They took a boat from the war. They took a boat over. They took a boat back. Never been in an aircraft. When they got home, they were put on a train to go home. So it's a little anxiety. There's a lot of anxiety there for those guys. And then when they get to the World War II Memorial, there you see all the joy and the reflection. You can see you can watch them feeling really proud about their memorial. It's in awe. But then you can see them when they go to the different stations they're reflecting about something right there. You can tell that something right there in that part of the world happened to them. And it's a pretty good day. I mean, we're only there for a couple of hours. We spend more time at the World War II Memorial than we do anywhere. But those couple of hours are, it's good. It's kind of a good news, bad news thing. There's a lot of joy there. They see the new memorial. But then when they get to the part of the memorial that is in the sector of the world they were in, that's when they start thinking about their buddies and all that. So, but there's a lot of joy there. Then we go back to bus and we have lunch. We take them on a little tour through the city. We have guides on the bus from Washington, D.C. that tell them all about the landscape, all the different buildings, and they point out everything of significance. So they go on a little bit of a sightseeing tour. At the same time, they're having lunch, and at the same time, they get to rest a little bit on the bus in the air conditioning. So that's it. And we do that tour purposely to give them a rest break and to give them lunch. A lot of them are not looking at the building. They don't care. They're just happy to be sitting down in an air-conditioned bus with a sandwich. And then we finally get to, and we go to the Lincoln Memorial, Korean Memorial, we go to the Marine Memorial, we go to the Women's Memorial, which is at the gate of Arlington, and then we get to Arlington. And when we get to Arlington, that is their most memorable part of the day, including their memorial. Arlington means, these guys are so reverent in Arlington, you don't even want to move. And this time in October, Honor Flight gets to lay a wreath at Arlington. So we've been trying to do that for 4 flights, and we finally got it done. We got approved to lay a wreath at Arlington. So we're going to we've got one World War II guy that was a POW. We got a Korean guy that was a POW. And then we got a Vietnam guy that's terminal. And then myself as the president, we're going to lay the wreath. So it's going to be a neat experience. And then they go to the airport and we go to the Air Force Memorial after Arlington, which sets up on the hill. I don't know if you've been there, but you can overlook the city. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous sight, as well as a impressive memorial. But they spend some time there. Then we go back to the airport on the return flight. And they walk into the airport, and there's all the girls, the swing dancers, the band music. And some of these guys can still cut a rug now, I'm telling you. They might be tired, but when they're out there, and they got those swing dancers out there, they get young again. And it's amazing how good some of those guys can dance. And you got to realize they're in their 90s. And so it's. Then we get back home at 8:30. They're tired. They are beat. They're expended. I'm sorry. I left out mail call. On the way back home on the flight, we do a thing called mail call. Because in the Army, that was their life. They look forward to the mail call to get the letters from their loved ones and their family, and so we do mail call on the plane. And of course, prior to that, we send out to the schools, send some letters in to the veterans, and we tell every family what to do, how to do it, etc. So they have letters from, 5th graders, 6th graders, USI students, high school students. Most of them I have close to 100 letters. Most of them. Not all of them are directed to them in name, but we get that many letters that we can disperse about 100 letters. Most of them will have a good number of family letters as well.
The airport office looks like a post office.
Yeah, and then it all goes to the airport office. Yeah, and they got a special area in there. It's full, bags full of mail. And then they do all the sorting, the airport staff and our staff together. We do the sorting. But anyway, when we go on the flight, either me or one of my other staff, we're standing in the front of the plane and we go, of course there's a bugle call for mail call. That's the other thing. Everything we do with a bugle call. I don't care if it's eating, if it's assembly, everything we do with a bugle call, because that's what those guys remember. They like that. And so we have a bugle call for mail call. And then we start passing the mail out. And, they're tearing open the letters. You can stand in the front of the aircraft, and I can tell you when that guy's reading a letter from a child, from a young student, or if he's reading a letter from home. When he's reading the letters from the kids, his eyes are sparkling, he's grinning, and then when he gets the one from home, it's still joy, but he's overwhelmed with joy. He's got tears in his eyes because his family has shared some experience with him. And that's a pretty hard flight because, I mean, you can watch those guys, and I don't care who you are, if you can get through that flight home without a tear in your eye, you're tough. Yeah. I'm telling you, you are tough. I almost get choked up talking about it. Uh-oh. There it goes. Oh, there we go. Okay, the process for flying with seniors. I know that's why you're here today, so we finally got around to that. How much time do I have left?
We only have 10 minutes left.
10 minutes, okay. I'm going to go through the process real quick. Of course, safety is, we've never had any incidents, knock on wood, but we feel like that's not coincidental. It's because of the plan that we have in place, the protocols that we have in place, and we don't feel like that's just coincidental that we haven't had any serious accidents. We have had a couple of vets that got sick, and our doctors were able to get them back to the point where we didn't have to leave them in Washington. But that wasn't safety related. It was health related. Of course, you're talking about flights with an average age of 90, 92. So when we go through the interviewing process, we use a triage system, and it's not a real fancy triage system, but it works for us. And of course, we have the doctors there, or the nurse practitioners, and they're looking at the paperwork for each veteran as they go through the process, because we interview by bus, so the doctors are assigned by bus, so they can look at all the medications that this guy is on, and they can say, well, you know what, he's a pretty healthy guy, and they talk to him, and they can look at him and say, well, you know, he's got a pretty good list of medication here, but he seems to be managing it pretty effectively. So he's going to be a B, and we have an ABC system. And of course, if the guy's a C, he's probably a serious diabetic or some other condition that's really serious, and we've got to monitor him to be sure he is taking his medications properly and he is doing the right things that he needs to be doing with the situation he's dealing with. In addition to that, we have a 1, 2, 3 system. And 1 is very little dementia, where they have very little memory loss. You know, at 92, you're going to have some memory loss. I don't care who you are. But if he's a 2, he or she's a 2, that demonstrates that there might be some, the doctors can pick up on it, there might be a little bit of impaired judgment there based on the questions that they went through. And then 3, often they show a lot of disorientation in the interview. They get disoriented, they're not able to communicate and answer the questions. They know, but they're just confused, and they may be a 3. So a person could be a C3 and he's still going to flight. It's just that the doctors know that on the flight, that those C3s take a lot more attention than an A3 or an A1. I mean, so it gives the doctors a good indicator, and we put the classification on their name tag, so that the doctors can say, oh, he's a C3, I'm going to talk to him about A, B, C, and D. And so that's how we do it. It's helpful in determining how we manage our process. We provide wheelchairs for every veteran. We take 85 veterans, we take 85 wheelchairs. And we got about 30 wheelchairs now that we leave at the airport. And by the way, our airport stores all of our wheelchairs for us. We got 105 or 10 wheelchairs, and Doug and his team has come up with a place for us to be able to store those, which that's huge, because where would we put 110 wheelchairs? We're a 501c3 organization. We don't want to spend people that donated money to fly a veteran on renting a building to put wheelchairs in. So there again, it's a regional airport can be of great value to the community. I'm not selling Doug's airport, but I'm just telling you what they do for us. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, okay. We have the flight physicians and nurse practitioners and physicians assistants. We have 1 per bus. When we get to Washington D.C., we break out into 4 buses because we had 186 people on the plane. So we get there, we got 4 buses. We used to have 3, now we got 4. Another issue we have to manage, and now we have to have a police escort through Washington, D.C., because with 3 buses, we were marginal. With 4 buses, we're not going anywhere. But when we get that police escort, not to play the Park Service escort, they can go up one-way streets the wrong way. They can do whatever they want. We never stop. I mean, the last time we were there, you on the last flight?
No, it was one.
Last time we were there was in April, was the Cherry Festival. Jam-packed, roads clogged up. Here we go. We're going up wrong way on an entrance ramp. We're going the wrong way on this street. We never stopped. They get us there. It's well worth the money. It's not cheap, but it's worth the money because those guys could have lost a better part of a day in that traffic.
5 minutes left.
5 minutes. Okay. We do have wheelchair. We do have guardian training for all the guardians. Have to go through training. If they don't go through the training, they don't fly. They don't participate. And we have. It's about an hour and a half of training. It's on wheelchair protocol, safety. It's on how to lift people out of a chair, where to grab them, how to grab them. It's all about preserving the safety of that veteran. That hour and a half of training is a full hour and a half. And we do a lot of repetition, having people do it, demonstrate how they're going to do it. They don't just sit there, they have to get up and demonstrate that they've absorbed what we're telling them. The ground crew, we do the same thing. We have a ground crew at the airport in the morning, one in the evening, about 30 people. They get the veterans from the chairs, from the cars, and in the beginning, in the morning, in the evening, they're putting them back into the cars. There's a process for that. They have to demonstrate they can do that. So we're very safety oriented, and we don't want a veteran having his skin pulled loose because somebody didn't know how to do it. We're not going to do that. So those are some of the protocols that we have in place for traveling with seniors. And there's a lot of time invested in protecting those seniors. Again, we've got about 100 volunteers that participate in the honor flight. It's a very, very meaningful process. The honor flight family, we stay connected. We have reunions for those guys. We want them to stay connected to their buddies that they met, their new buddies. Oddly, sometimes some of those guys actually served together on the flight. That are on the flight actually served together in the war, which is that's interesting too. If you might ask, how can you help? Well, you can volunteer. I've got packets over here on the table that's got the applications for volunteers, the application for a veteran, the application for a guardian. I've got the brochure for honor flight. I've got cards there that from our volunteer coordinator, and my cards are there as well. Please feel free to take some of those if you know of a veteran. Or if you're interested in volunteering, you can take some of those or you can talk to me afterwards. We will get you signed up. If you know veterans and you want to sign them up, you can go to the website. You can get an application off of the website. All 3, veteran, guardian, volunteer, they're all on the website. The website is honorflightsi.org. We'll get to that in just a second. I'm going to speed through this real quick. We do have needs in volunteer. Even though we got 100 volunteers, all 100 of them can't always be available for everything we do. So we can use more volunteers. Fundraising we can always use, particularly if we can find people that want to speak to organizations like this or to foundations or some corporations, civic groups, and that kind of thing. We try to stay as visible as we can stay, because once people know the story, understand the story, they want to help out. And sometimes it may just be a donation. Sometimes it may be they volunteer. Speaking of donations, how did I miss that? Huh? But no, you can go to honorflightsi.org, and you can also donate online at honorflightsi.org. We have a wheelchair sponsorship program, which I think is really cool. You see the wheelchair here with the name of the veteran on the back. You can sponsor a wheelchair for $100, and we will have one of these made and put it on the back of its wheelchair. We got some wheelchairs with 3 names on them. And some of them were brothers, some of them were brothers and uncle. People send them in for all reasons. It does help pay for the wheelchairs. Those wheelchairs get thrown in and out of a bus on a trip at every memorial. Load them up, unload them, take them out, load them up. They get slammed in that bus, underneath those buses, and it's bad. I talked about mail call, talked about the welcome home, and I am at the end, and you can stay connected with us at honorflightsi.org, and our Facebook is Honor Flight of Southern Indiana. Carol, I'm on time.
Thank you.